In this workout, we're going to dissolve the gates of the knees, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But first, let's just get the basic structure for the knee joint. So settling in, get the weight centered in the feet, relax the hips, and the knee is going to work a lot like the elbow. So in the sense that we worked on when we were at the elbow joints of not straining or straightening too much, but also not bending and squeezing too much, you're going to have to play the same game, calibrating the amount of bend you need in the knee. And often what happens with the knee is that people try to make an adjustment posturally to correct knee issues, but you actually have more success opening up your knee when you adjust the hips, the quad, and the ankles. So think of the knee as really the balance between the hips and the ankles. And that will help you instead of trying to work directly with the knee by itself. But now, just settling in, focus on the physical weight and balance. And working from the ground up, really let the feet get comfortable on the floor. So, in other words, give yourself permission to tweak, turn, twist, and adjust anything above the feet in order to serve the connection between the feet and the floor. So to make the feet more comfortable, more integrated into the ground, let the rest of the body above it settle into place to meet that connection, to make it better and stronger. And as you come up through the body to get this settling in, one of the concepts that you want to get used to for the knees is that you can open and adjust the knee from the back of the knee. In other words, there's all this tissue, there's a cavity behind the knee joint, and if you can open that from the back, that's where you'll make your best adjustments. Now opening the hips and the quad just a little bit. Again, so that the tailbone has a sense of sinking and heaviness. The whole sacrum does. But from the front, from the quad, there's a little bit of opening. And as you get that lift and rise and opening, continue to feel up through the spine, until you get to the crown of the head. And if you can here, just for a minute before we start the dissolving process and working down, just see if you can sense the relationship between the crown of the head and the soles of the feet. In other words, even the position of the crown of the head when you have that little lift going upward should help reinforce the connection at the feet. And once you start to find that link, then you've really threaded yourself through. You've got a body sort of more like one integrated piece of fabric, piece of material, where the adjustments at the top influence the connection at the bottom. That's the state we're trying to set up, and it's sort of the background for the standing and dissolving practice. So even when you move your mind into specific heights and specific places and work on dissolving, to some degree we want this threaded connection all the way through. So now just starting that dissolve at the crown of the head. And even though we go height by height and layer by layer, I always think it's a good idea to dissolve the crown of the head point, the gate specifically, because it kind of gets you on the right wavelength for dissolving. And it's going to help you sort of keep that same attitude and that same mode all the way down through the rest of the layers, rest of the body. And as you kick off that dissolving process, it may naturally start to lead you to a downward flow. This is one of the things over time that we're trying to develop. So just be conscious of the edges of this downward release. It's the same pace almost. It can often be the same pace as like if you put a dry sponge halfway into a glass of water, and you watch the water sort of move upward through the sponge. Here we're doing the opposite. You've got a main focus, but then at the edges, the downward flow is starting to seep its way through new areas and new heights below. So start feeling your way through the temples, the forehead, the third eye, and even the eyes over the next minute or two. Now, from the eyes, the ears, down through the face and the jaw. Trying to, as you start to feel into the neck and the throat, not by stretching or forcing anything open through the neck, just by feeling into the spaces around the vertebrae, trying to let things expand, release, relax, and let go, so that you have a sense of more space through the vertebrae of the neck. It should lead to a lighter quality. Now all the way to the base of the neck and the throat, spreading your awareness through your shoulders, the armpits, the chest, the upper back. Letting the mind soak into all these different spaces, and then paying attention to the lightness of touch with the mind to find the gates. And not just feel the physical tissue, but feel the energy of those gates. And if it's ready to, let it release and dissolve. Now feeling through the rib cage, the heart, the lungs, the ribs, and the spaces between the ribs. And as you come down to the height of the diaphragm, feel the elbows. Working with the elbows is going to set you up for the same kind of approach to the knee. So just remember how we dissolved them before. You feel all around the elbow first, the gates above and below the joint, on the sides, right in the center, and then inward to the middle of the whole joint. And the more you go into the center of the joint, you might find yourself focusing more on the left side or the right side. even with the deeper awareness of the center of the joint, try to bring the mind back out a little bit and balance left and right so you're not twisting or distorting the shape of the body physically or energetically. Now feeling the rest of the way through the belly. Again, getting better and better at working in layers with the body. So the whole shape of the belly first, and then in through the organs, in towards the lower dantian. And the more you can feel in towards the belly and find the lower dantian, the greater chance you have of making that a still point and an anchor point for the rest of this process. So the same way we talked about threading a connection from the crown of the head down through the feet to get your physical alignment stable, resting the mind in the lower dantian will stabilize your energetic alignments and organize the body energetically. So now feeling down through the hips, the pelvis, the anus, the genitals, the perineum, making the transition from the torso to the legs. And physically, if you can now, sitting into the quad a little bit, try to have the feeling of the joints of the sacrum, the hips, the butt, and the thighs really support the weight of the upper body. We want to develop in the legs the capacity to take all the weight of the upper body, but simultaneously have a sense of flow and movement through the legs. So what this means is that instead of feeling like the legs tense up to hold you up, you actually have to continuously release through the legs. But it's a release without collapse, and often it'll lead to a feeling of greater density in the legs and heaviness in the legs. But ultimately, you stay away from collapsing the joints, contracting the legs. Instead, you'll find a way to get everything to flow through. There's a yin and yang contrast here where the upper body gets light and feels expanded when you make this separation, and the lower body gets heavy and sinks down. So aiming initially for a heaviness in the legs that's not the same as contraction will really serve you well through this process. So feeling that sinking and something moving through, but it's moving through everywhere at once. So it's like a river flowing through. It's not like one wave is going to go through and that's it. It's continuous and it's always there. But now feel down to your knees and feel around the kneecap. Here we want to find 4 gates, 2 above and 2 below, and they're on either side of the center line, just like in the back of the elbows, the elbow tip. These are the minor gates around the joint first before we go into the center of the joint. And the symmetry of 2 above, 2 below, inside and outside, and left and right can really start to help you feel where things are closed down and where things are open. And by trying to feel these gates at the front of the knees simultaneously, can start to develop a sense of balance between left and right. And as with all these other gates in this whole process, you're constantly alternating between sort of telling yourself what you should feel versus discovering what's actually there that we normally don't pay attention to. So don't be surprised if you slip into expectations about what you should feel. And every once in a while, see if you can bring yourself back more to noticing what's actually there. Now we want to feel the back of the knee. So again, sort of above and below the joint. There are all these big tendons that come in from the calf muscles and hamstrings. So just see what you can feel. Getting that same kind of minor gate model behind the knee. And then also the sides of the knee, so inside and outside at the center of the knee joint. All those tendons that run along the outside, ligaments. But we're more interested in sensing the energy of these structures rather than making even minor physical adjustments to the structures, which is really tricky, especially around the knees. Now finally bringing awareness to the center of the knee joint. Letting things expand and open gradually. Without forcing it, and just like, think of this as a micro version of what we did with the lower dantian. When you get your mind into that place, even here in the center of the knee joint, it can be a stability point and a still point with your awareness for everything else. And now from the knees, just sinking the rest of the way down, letting everything drop. So you've done dissolving all the way down to the knees. Just reinforce this feeling of sinking and connecting to the ground from the knees through the shins, the ankles, and feet. Soaking the mind back in, getting that nice, heavy, saturated feel the rest of the way down. You just let everything go. Down through the ankles. and down through the soles of the feet. Yeah, great job.